Bureaucracy, check. Housing, check. One-way ticket to Italy, check, check, check. Whilst all of these aspects are important, really they're only a small part of the story. 8 years of living in Italy has shown me that moving to Italy runs so much deeper than a to-do list. There are so many things that you have to think about, but in particular, there are two main categories I think that most people don't really consider enough, and I don't hear enough of these moving to Italy gurus talking about, because essentially, if you get these things wrong, it really affects your experience in this country. So I think we need to talk about them. The first is the very real human side of your experience. There is such a huge focus when you decide to move to Italy on the practical aspects, those things that you must get done in order to make the move possible. Things like bureaucracy, sorting out accommodation where you're going to be living, learning the language, finding a job if that's what you have to do. That you don't necessarily consider that isn't the whole story. It's huge, it's a massive part of what your life is going to be, but moving to Italy is never just a tick box exercise. There are so many adjustments that you have to get used to that fall beyond the to-do list that you might have created. The first is that initial feeling when you arrive of feeling like a tourist, except now you're becoming a resident. And this is actually a nice adjustment because you know that you don't have to hop on a plane again at the end of the week necessarily, but it's still something that you've got to prepare yourself for, because depending on how you spend your initial few days living here will depend on how quickly this particular adjustment passes. Because I think if you come here and you have a job and you have things that you need to be getting on with, very quickly you soon get into the rhythm of everyday life here. But if you're here and you've got like some time on your hands to start off with, I feel like this period lasts longer because you're not yet fully adjusting to everyday life and to routines and kind of creating that sense of normality for yourself. And so you feel that in this weird in-between stage for some time while you're trying to navigate what your everyday life is really going to look like. So although that can be a nice adjustment, it's still something you've got to think about nevertheless. But from there, you've got other adjustments that can often be more challenging. Things like cultural adjustments, adjusting to systems and processes here, the way things work, the way life is lived. These can become more difficult and challenging depending on you as a person and your ability to adapt. I would say for me, 8 years down the line, I still find it really difficult to adjust to some of the aspects of life here. In particular, there are three main things that I still struggle with. Firstly, it's kind of the lack of uniformity in Italy, the way that one region does something completely different to another. One region will do a bureaucracy document a particular way, another one will have a completely different set of rules, yet it's all under the umbrella of Italy. I find that really complicated. I would also say that I find it so difficult to believe that we're in 2026 and a lot of the online portals and systems here do not work. And websites here for many of the government offices feel really, really clunky and outdated. And so I find that difficult because it feels like there's a lack of efficiency. But also I would say the third aspect is the closure of businesses in the afternoon. Now I get it because especially in the summer, it's ridiculously hot in the afternoon and really you only venture out if you absolutely have to. But still the fact that, you know, if you have something that you have to do, you've got really two parts of your day. First thing in the morning up until 1 o'clock and then later in the afternoon from 5 o'clock onwards. It does feel like there's a huge chunk of your day that's avoided. And if you've only got that time spare, you really have to consider how you structure your day in order to get the things that you need to do done. So even 8 years down the line, I still struggle with those particular aspects. And it's going to be the same for you. There are going to be certain aspects of life here that take you a little bit longer to get used to, if at all. Adaptation is very key. You've got to be willing to change, willing to go with the flow, absolutely. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy at all. I mean, even I would say down to making friends. This is something that I've been speaking about recently quite a bit on my socials because I realised that it's a really underrated but super vital component of your move, because you might think that you can come here and easily make friends. But as I've spoken about in a lot of my content, including this video up here, it goes so much deeper than that, because friendships here go back to school, they go back to childhood, and Italians take their time to get to know you and to trust you. And so while eventually you will make friends, they are always going to be on a much more superficial level than those friendships that go back to childhood, which are much more deep rooted. And so I feel like you have to recognize that that's going to be how it is here. And that is very much a cultural thing, I would say. Also, I think you've got to consider that even though you can have these so-called expat communities in presence and you can meet people, and they're a great way to do so, I thoroughly recommend it, especially at the beginning. Some members of those communities don't live in Italy full time, and they do the whole Schengen shuffle. So they're here for a certain number of months and then they go away again for a certain number of months before coming back later. And so that impacts your ability to make solid, continuous friendships, because these people are not here in Italy all the time. And so these are some things that you've really got to consider, because loneliness is something that bit me hard at the very beginning of my journey. And, you know, it's still something that at times I grapple with, because although I have friends here now, you still feel like an outsider sometimes in certain particular moments, in certain social situations. Some people have it lucky, like, you know, they have good colleagues or they are in a position immediately where they can make connections, but others less so. And so if you want to have your sense of community, you've got to be putting the work in before you arrive, connecting with other expats online, maybe considering joining my own community, the Aperitivo Lounge, where we're all supporting each other both on the move here, and also some of my members are now already here in Italy too. So, you know, you've got to find your people, because they will be your kind of strength throughout this entire process. You know, when it comes to the cultural aspects and adjusting to the ways of life here, you know, if you don't prepare yourself, you can very easily wind up regretting your decision to move here. I mean, I also think about like Sundays and public holidays and festivals. These are all family events. And if you're here on your own, I feel like you notice it. Maybe not as much in the summer, because you can go out, you can occupy yourself, you can go to the beach, you can fill your time in other ways. But when it's winter and it's dreary and cold outside and there's not much going on, I think that's when it really hits you that on a Sunday, everybody's having lunch with their family. You might go to the bar and have a drink, but you know that everyone around you is going home to have lunch with their families, and you're going home to eat on your own, for example. And so those are the moments that not many people talk about, but I think overall, this human side is so important. I had a breakdown here in late 2019, and I really believe it's because I didn't prepare myself fully for this human aspect. I was so fixated on just ticking off all the bureaucracy I needed to do pre-Brexit that I didn't even consider how I would feel emotionally. And that's why I talk about this so much on this channel, because it's not ever just a tick box exercise. Please spend some time to sit with how you're feeling, your emotions, preparing yourself for these aspects of life here too, because I promise you it is a holistic experience to move to Italy. It's never just one or the other. The second aspect that people don't really consider is leaning into your intuition. This is when you decide that you want to move to Italy, but somehow it makes no sense on paper, and you feel like you don't have all the answers, which would lead many a guru to tell you don't do it. However, I have a different take on this. When I decided to move to Italy in 2018, I didn't have all of the answers at all. I moved here with a confirmed appointment to have a trial run at the Montessori school in Napoli, but my job position wasn't really confirmed there until after that trial had completed. So I moved here with a possibility, an opportunity, but not a promise. I also moved here with a lot of questions unanswered. I had to figure things out when I got here, and it took me some time, but I made it. It came together. So it's not to say that this is necessarily the best course of action. I do think in hindsight I should have prepared myself better, especially more for the emotional aspect, as I've just touched on. But it's not to say that you shouldn't move here just because you don't have everything lined up in a row. Life doesn't work that way. There will never be the optimal moment to come here. You will move here feeling like you're in a bit of a whirlwind, but essentially when you're here, that's when you can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and actually sort your life out. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people hold back on. They have this resistance. The intuition is telling them to do something, but the practical, pragmatic side of them is saying, but your life isn't ready for this. And I think you should always lean into your intuition, because somehow your intuition knows what's best for you, even if you yourself don't in that moment. And a really good example of this is me choosing to live in South Italy. I've lived in South Italy for the whole time that I've been here, so 8 years to date. And on paper, that makes no sense. Like, you know, I come from London and I've moved to the south of Italy. It's like two different worlds. But intuitively, I knew that this was the place I was meant to be living in. I felt this connection. It's never made a lot of sense every time I've explained it, but it's made sense to me, and fundamentally that's the most important thing. And I have to be honest with you, I have no regrets about moving here. Like, moving to the south of Italy feels natural to me. I feel like I understand life here, even if I don't always agree with it. It's true, I still have that very British side of me sometimes, but I feel comfortable here. And I have visited other parts of Italy and I didn't have that same kind of feeling. And so this is where you've got to lean into your intuition. On paper, one part of Italy might be best for you, but how you feel about that is going to make a real difference as to whether or not your life is successful there or not. If you go to a place just because it makes sense on paper, but you hate it, what's the sense? You've moved here to live your life, to have a new experience and to grow. And you're only going to do that when you lean into your intuition. And so, although this is not something that any kind of move to Italy guru would ever tell you to do, I do think you should lean into your intuition more. It's worked for me, and I know it's worked for many other people who have also moved here. And sometimes you might move here listening to how you feel about a place, and then you decide it's not the place for you. Perfectly fine. Everything is an experience, okay? I feel like a lot of people get hung up on the fact that they have to move to Italy and it's the destination. You've arrived, but you've only just begun your journey in reality. You know, I've moved around quite a bit. I lived in Palermo, back in Salerno province. You know, like, it's part of your journey here. Just because you arrive, you choose a place, doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life living there. You're free to try different places and to see what works for you. And you only really know that when you've got your boots on the ground, when you're living here. And that's the most important thing. So many people get stuck in the weeds of trying to kind of, you know, work out practically what's best for them and trying to understand, you know, where can suit their lifestyle that they have now here in Italy. But life here does not work like that. I promise you, you're not going to have an identical life here in Italy. It's going to change in some way. And for some people, it can be a very drastic change, like it has been for me. But for others, it might just be, you know, a subtle one. But at some point, your life will change. And so trying to find a place in Italy or a lifestyle in Italy that's going to be very similar to yours is really a waste of time. You're much better off listening to yourself, listening to your intuition, listening to the kind of lifestyle that you want here, and then trying to find the place that really matches that, rather than looking just purely from a pragmatic point of view. I think, as I've said, from the human element of moving here, it is a very holistic process. And so you have so many different things that you need to kind of think about that I think, you know, it's very difficult for you to move here and make a success of your life if you are solely pragmatic. I think you have to lean into the human side and you have to lean into your intuition. Absolutely. And so if you're planning to move to Italy, I hope that this video has given you some inspiration, because sometimes your life may not match up with what the experts are telling you or with what general advice is often bandied about. And so I hope that this can give you a different perspective and something definitely to consider. And if you're really, really keen still on doing so, this is the video I think you should watch next, because I truly believe it's possible. There's just a few things you've got to get right first. I will see you in the next video.